He hadn't called her on her birthday. Not last year. Not the year before. He missed Mother's Day again. But at the time he had reasons. Deadlines. Meetings. Life. Until one day life stopped. And he was left standing in the silence she once filled. That's when he found the journal. A small, leather-bound book with pages that whispered what she never said aloud. This is a story of distance, of memory. And of a son who didn't realize what he had until it was gone. And it begins on a quiet Tuesday, with a phone call he wasn't ready for. It was raining when Daniel Cooper got the call. The kind of soft, misty rain that made the streets shimmer and the air feel heavy with memory. He was in his office, surrounded by glowing monitors and half-empty coffee cups, when his phone buzzed quietly on the desk. He almost didn't answer. Another spam call, he thought. But something in him, a still, small pull, made him pick up. "Hello," was. Then a quiet voice, thick with courtesy and something else. Something final. "Mr. Cooper. This is Deputy Fields. I'm calling from Pine Hollow, Missouri. I'm sorry to inform you. Your mother, Mrs. Martha Cooper. She passed this morning." For a moment, Daniel didn't understand. He stood still, watching the rain trace lines down the glass. Passed. He felt a chill not because of what was said but because of what he felt. Very little. Martha Cooper had been many things in her life. A schoolteacher for 37 years. Choir member at First Baptist. Baker of lemon pies everyone in Pine Hollow swore were better than sunshine itself. And of course Daniel's mother. But that title had grown faint in recent years. He moved to Chicago 15 years ago. The visits slowed, then stopped. Calls turned to text, then silence. She never complained. Not once. Just sent the occasional holiday card and little care packages with cookies he never ate. And now she was gone. The funeral would be Friday. The deputy said she left everything to him. Those belongings. What little savings she had. There was no one else. "She thought the world of you, Mr. Cooper," the deputy added kindly. "Talked about you every week down at the diner." Daniel thanked him. Hung up. Sat down. The rain kept falling. A journey backward. By Thursday morning, Daniel was driving south. The rental car smelled like lemon air freshener and felt too new. The highways stretched out like ribbons of gray, and as the city gave way to fields and woods, his chest felt tighter. He hadn't been back to Pine Hollow in over a decade. He left after college, determined never to return. Too small. Too quiet. Too much of the past, he'd told himself. But now, here he was, driving back into the past he'd locked away like an attic door. As he pulled into the town, everything looked smaller. The corner diner. The old hardware store with the wooden sign. The church with its peeling white steeple. And then, at the end of Maple Lane, there it was. The house. His mother's house. The house smelled like time. Old wood, lavender, and a faint trace of cinnamon. Her favorite scent. Nothing had changed. The floral couch. The faded family photos. The brass cross above the fireplace. It was like stepping into a memory that had stood still, waiting for him. Daniel wandered through slowly. His footsteps echoed. In the kitchen, her apron still hung on the hook. In the living room, a book lay open on her armchair, as if she'd just stepped away. But she never would again. He walked upstairs. His old bedroom door creaked open. There it was. A twin bed. Posters of baseball players still on the walls. A lamp with a crack from when he threw a baseball inside. She never fixed it. She never changed a thing. The funeral was small. A dozen or so townspeople. Women in church hats. Men with weathered hands. Everyone remembered Martha Cooper. "She taught my granddaughter to read. She always brought extra cornbread to the church suppers. She prayed for my boy when he was sick." Everyone had a story. But Daniel just sat quietly, hands folded, watching the simple wooden casket. He felt guilt, yes. But it came in waves, bumping gently against a shore he couldn't quite reach. A woman touched his arm as they left the service. Miss Evelyn, the neighbor. "She loved you so, Daniel," she said. Every Christmas, she'd light a candle for you. Said it helped her feel close. Daniel tried to smile. Thank you, Miss Evelyn. But inside he felt hollow. It was the third night in the house when he found it. He'd gone into the attic looking for old photo albums. Dust floated in beams of moonlight as he shuffled through boxes marked Christmas and school keepsakes. Then, in a plain cardboard box near the back, he saw it. A small, leather-bound journal. Brown. Worn. Tied with a thin ribbon. No label. He opened it. The first page read, in her handwriting, "Asterisk to Daniel if you ever find this. I wrote down the things I couldn't say out loud. Maybe you'll understand. Maybe not. But I hope you'll read it with the heart of the boy I once held in my arms. Love always. Mom." Daniel stared at the page. The attic was so quiet, he could hear his own breath. He sat down on the floor and turned the page. The first entry. March 4, 1997. Daniel's off to college. I stood in the driveway waving until his car turned the corner and disappeared. I smiled so he wouldn't see me cry. I want him to fly. I want him to have the world. But the house feels empty tonight. Even the cat keeps looking for him. I made his bed and folded his shirt just the way he liked. Silly, I know. But it makes me feel close. Daniel felt a lump in his throat. March 17, 1999. He forgot my birthday. Again. But I'm sure he's busy. Maybe he'll call tomorrow. I made lemon pie anyway. Maybe I'll freeze a slice for when he visits. If he visits. His hands trembled slightly as he turned the pages. Each entry was like a window into a heart he had ignored. She had written nearly every week for years. Letters to no one. Or maybe letters to him. A son begins to listen. That night, Daniel sat at the old kitchen table, the journal open beside a warm cup of tea. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to cry. Not loudly. Just soft tears, like the ones she used to shed silently in the hallway after a parent-teacher night when he got into trouble. He thought of her hands. Always busy, always gentle. He thought of the smell of cookies in the kitchen, the sound of her humming hymns while folding laundry. All the things he thought would always be there. But in her words she was still speaking. And he was finally listening. Sometimes the words we need to hear come after the silence has settled. And sometimes love is written not in grand gestures, but in quiet pages left behind. Daniel had spent years chasing success, forgetting the one heart that beat for him through it all. But now, as he turned the pages of his mother's journal, something began to stir. The past was not finished with him yet. And neither was she. There's something about the past, it doesn't shout. It whispers. And if you're not careful, you'll miss it completely. But Daniel had started listening. And in that attic, surrounded by dust and time, he was beginning to hear his mother's voice in a way he never had before. Daniel didn't sleep much that night. The house creaked and shifted, as old houses do, but it wasn't the noise keeping him awake. It was her words. That journal, simple, unadorned, now felt like a sacred thing. He carried it downstairs in the morning like it was made of glass, placed it carefully on the kitchen table beside his coffee, like she might still be watching. And in a way maybe she was. He opened it again, turned the pages slowly, let each word breathe. The voice from the page. April 28, 2001. Daniel didn't come home for Easter this year. Said work was too busy. I told him I understood and I meant it. But I still set his place at the table. Old habits, I guess. I made his favorite. Ham with brown sugar glaze and that green bean casserole he pretended not to like but always finished. I ended up giving most of it to Miss Evelyn next door. She said it tasted like home. That made me smile. Daniel closed his eyes. That Easter, he remembered that day. Vaguely. Deadline. A dinner invitation in the city. He hadn't even thought to call. He turned the page. May 11, 2003. Mother's Day. No call this year. That's okay. Maybe he forgot. I walked down to the pond after church and listened to the frogs. It's peaceful there. I used to take him when he was small. He'd chase dragonflies and pretend to fish with a stick. I wonder if he remembers. I wish I'd taken more pictures back then. Daniel's throat tightened. He did remember the pond. The dragonflies. The way she'd bring a blanket and read while he splashed in the shallows. He just hadn't thought of it in years. And now, she was gone and her memories were ink and paper. That afternoon, Daniel drove out to the pond. It was just as she'd described. Still, quiet, ringed with wildflowers and cattails. He parked and walked down to the water's edge. Sat on the old bench beneath the willow. The breeze smelled like honeysuckle. Somewhere in the trees, birds chirped. A dragonfly flitted past. He laughed quietly to himself. "Hey, Ma," he said aloud. Felt strange. "Right. I remember the fishing stick. I remember you bringing lemonade in that old green thermos." He looked out over the water. The ripples glistened in the afternoon sun. "I wish I'd come home more." The breeze stirred the grass, like the world was sighing in agreement. That evening, he opened the journal again. The pages now felt like time travel, a way to go back to sit beside her in moments he had missed. September 15, 2005. Daniel called today. Said work is hard but going well. I didn't say much, just listened. I miss his voice when he was little. Back when he still believed I had all the answers. I suppose every mother has to let her child grow away from her. Still some nights it's hard. I wonder if he knows how often I pray for him. Daniel remembered that call. Had lasted maybe 5 minutes. He'd been distracted, watching an email come in while she talked about the weather. He never asked how she was doing. The days passed slowly. Daniel began sorting through the house. Gently, respectfully. Not like a man emptying a space, but like a son walking through his childhood. He found a drawer full of birthday cards she'd written but never sent. One for every year he hadn't visited. Each one signed the same way. "With all my love, Mom." He found old photos too. Him in Little League, him at prom, him in his cap and gown. She'd kept everything. Even a grocery receipt from the first time they went shopping together after he got his driver's license. And then, in the bottom of her cedar chest, he found something that made him sit down and stare. It was a music box. Tiny, porcelain, with delicate painted violets. He remembered it. She used to play it at bedtime when he was little. The tune was soft, lullaby-like. He hadn't heard it in over 30 years. He wound it gently. The music began to play, slightly off-key now, but still sweet. He closed his eyes and let the sound take him back. Between 2 pages of the journal, folded carefully, was a letter. It was addressed to him. Not "Dear Daniel," not "My son," just "To the boy I love the most." His hands trembled as he opened it. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I hope you found this in time to know how much I loved you. I didn't want to burden you with my sadness while I was alive. I always wanted to be your soft place to land, not something you avoided. But I also want you to know, I was never angry. Not once. You gave me so much joy, Daniel. You were my miracle. I watched you grow into a man from the porch window, cheering you on even when you couldn't hear me. If you carry anything from me into your future, let it be this. Never let pride stand between you and the people you love. Time is the one thing we don't get back. And no matter where you go, I'll be with you. Every sunrise, every song, every kind word you give to another. Love always." Daniel held the letter to his chest and sobbed. Not just for her, but for the years he'd wasted, the calls he hadn't made, the holidays missed, and the simple sweetness he now ached for. Some stories aren't told until after the last chapter is written. But that doesn't mean they're over. Daniel came home expecting to clean out a house. But what he found was a lifetime, gently preserved in ink and memory. In that quiet town with the journal in his hands, he was finally hearing his mother's voice, and learning that forgiveness doesn't always come from others. Sometimes it starts within. But the journal still had pages left. And what waited next? would change everything. Grief, for some, is a sudden storm. For others, it's a long, quiet rain. For Daniel, it had become both, loud and lonely, rushing in waves through a house he hadn't walked in for years. But now, with every page of his mother's journal, with every folded note and fragile memory, he wasn't just grieving her death. He was grieving the years he chose to stay away. Daniel woke early the next morning, earlier than usual. The sun hadn't yet crested the hills beyond Pine Hollow, but the sky was beginning to glow with that soft golden blush that only small towns seem to catch. He stood at the sink in his mother's kitchen, the kettle hissing gently. The same ceramic mug she always used, white with a faded cardinal on it, sat in his hands warm with tea. The journal lay open on the table. He had left off at a curious note. One entry mentioned a drawer he hadn't yet opened. The desk was in the study, a room he hadn't spent much time in as a boy. It was where his mother graded papers, paid bills, and wrote letters she never mailed. He opened the bottom drawer slowly. Inside were bundles of envelopes, tied with simple string. Dozens of them, maybe more. All addressed to him. He lifted one. Daniel, Christmas 2008. Another. Daniel, April 2011, after our call. He untied the first bundle and began reading. December 25, 2008. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. I know you're busy, but I always like to imagine what you might be doing today. Maybe you're walking in the snow. Maybe you're laughing with friends. Hope so. I made your favorite peppermint bark today, just in case. Miss Evelyn took some home. Said I should open a shop. I laughed. I told her my best customer was too far away now. You haven't called in a while, and that's okay. I keep telling myself that it means you're living a full life. That's all I ever wanted for you. I miss the sound of your voice. Merry Christmas, my boy. Love, Mum. Daniel's hand trembled. He set the letter down and opened another. April 3, 2011. You called today. You sounded tired. I asked if something was wrong, but you brushed it off. You've always done that. Worn armor you think no one can see through. But I saw it, even through the phone. I know you think you're being strong. But there's strength in sharing too. I hope one day you let someone in. Even if it's not me. Truth between the lines. Daniel read for hours. Letters from holidays. From her birthdays. From random Tuesday afternoons when she just needed to talk to him, even if it meant talking to paper. There was one letter, though, that stood out. One where the tone shifted, quiet but firm. October 9, 2015. Daniel. I've been writing these letters for years. I keep thinking I'll stop, that it's foolish. But I can't seem to help it. It's how I still feel close to you, But I want to say something today. And I hope one day you'll hear it with love and not pain. You've grown so far away. And it's not just distance. It's something deeper. I feel like I've lost you without ever having a chance to say goodbye. I don't want you to carry guilt. I only want you to understand that even in my quiet sadness, I have loved you every day. And I always will. He stopped there. Closed the letter. Let the silence in the room settle around him. A visit to Miss Evelyn. Later that day, Daniel walked next door to see Miss Evelyn. She was nearly 80 now, but as sharp as ever. Her eyes lit up when she saw him at her door. Well, Lord above, she said, pulling her shawl tight. If it isn't the prodigal son. Come on in. Her house smelled like ginger and furniture polish. She poured him tea without asking and sat across from him at the small kitchen table. I've been reading her journal, he said quietly. And the letters. Miss Evelyn nodded gently. I figured you might. She wrote so much, Daniel said. Things I never knew. Things I didn't deserve to know. Evelyn looked him straight in the eye. That woman loved you more than life itself, Daniel. She never stopped hoping you'd come back through that door. Daniel looked down. I wish I had. She reached over and touched his hand. Regret's a heavy coat, she said. But love, that's a fire. It don't go out just because someone's gone. That night, Daniel took the music box from the cedar chest and wound it again. He placed it beside the journal on the nightstand. The tune played, delicate and warbled, as he lay back and closed his eyes. He thought of the letters, her handwriting, the simple, unfailing way she had believed in him, even as he drifted further away. He thought of his own life, now quiet and clean but empty. His apartment in the city was full of sleek things and silent dinners. No warmth, no notes, no lemon pies. Here in the home he ran from, he had found more love in a week than in the last 10 years combined. He wept softly again, but not just from sorrow. This time something else had taken root. Oh, the letters we never send are sometimes the ones that matter most. They carry the weight of love too tender to speak, too private to share. But they wait, patient as time itself, for someone willing to listen. Daniel came home looking for closure. What he found were pages still open, love still alive in ink and memory. And though his mother was gone, her words had begun to soften the edges of his heart. But what he didn't know yet was that the journal held one story even he wasn't ready for. A part of her life he never knew. Love never truly leaves a house. It lingers in the walls, the smell of old books, the way the morning sun hits the floorboards. For Daniel, each passing day in his mother's home didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning. And now, the journal was about to reveal something he never expected. A story his mother never shared out loud. Daniel had gotten used to the rhythm of the house. Morning tea in the cardinal mug. Reading a few entries from the journal. Sitting out on the porch in the late afternoon, listening to the birds his mother used to feed. But on that particular morning something shifted. He turned to a new page in the journal, and the heading caught his eye. The garden gate, and the secret I never told him. His brow furrowed. He remembered the garden, a small patch behind the house, grown wild now with ivy and stubborn lilies. But what secret? He leaned in closer, heart quiet, as if her voice was coming through the page. Hidden chapter. July 12, 1996. Daniel was 12 the summer I made the garden gate. He doesn't remember, I'm sure. He was busy with baseball and comic books. But that gate was the hardest thing I ever built with my own 2 hands. I told him it was to keep the deer out. And it was partly. But the truth is, I was building a place to remember someone. Someone I lost long before Daniel was born. Daniel sat back in his chair. Someone. He turned the page slowly. His name was Thomas. We met when I was 17. He worked at the feed store. Had a laugh that made everyone turn to listen. We were inseparable that summer. We'd sit by the creek and talk about dreams. Big ones. He wanted to move to Nashville and become a songwriter. But he never made it. He was drafted that fall. Sent overseas. We wrote letters. But after a while the replies stopped. A chaplain knocked on our door one rainy morning and told me he was gone. Just like that. I never told anyone. Not even Daniel's father. Some stories are too tender to speak aloud. But I built that gate and planted that garden to have a place for him. Small corner of peace. Daniel never noticed. And I never minded. Some love isn't meant to be understood. Just remembered. Daniel stood behind the house now, the journal still in his hand, staring at the overgrown garden. The gate was still there, weathered, leaning a bit but standing. He opened it gently. The hinges creaked. The path was barely visible under the weeds. He crouched down and began to clear the leaves. Slowly, carefully, like unwrapping something sacred. Took an hour, maybe more. But under the thick brush, he found a small stone. No inscription. Just a heart carved into the center. He traced it with his fingers. "I never knew," he whispered. And then, almost without realizing, he said aloud, "I wish I could have thanked him." Later that day, Daniel returned to the cedar chest. Something nudged at his memory. A photograph he had seen once as a child. He dug carefully through the bottom drawer. And there it was. A young man in uniform, standing next to a smiling girl who looked barely older than a teenager. His mother. On the back, in faded pen. T&M, summer 1964. He stared at it for a long time. She had carried this love with her, quietly, gently, her whole life. He wasn't sure what moved him more, the story itself or the way she had honored it in silence. Miss Evelyn knows. That evening he walked next door again. Miss Evelyn opened the door before he knocked. "I had a feeling," she said. "Come in." He held up the photograph. "Do you know who this is?" She looked at it and nodded slowly. "Thomas Granger," she said softly. "Your mother never talked about him, but I remember. He used to walk her home from school. Sweetest boy you ever met." Daniel swallowed hard. She built a whole garden for him. Evelyn smiled faintly. "Some people leave footprints, even when they're gone. Your mother carried him in her heart her whole life, but never let it make her bitter." Daniel looked at the photo again. "She was deeper than I ever realized." Evelyn patted his hand. "Aren't we all? It's easy to think we know the people who raised us. But every mother, every father, was once a child with dreams, heartbreaks, and hidden joys we may never fully understand." In her journal, Daniel's mother gave him more than memories. She gave him pieces of her soul. A love story tucked in a garden, a gate she built with her hands, and a reminder that the heart holds many stories, not all of them spoken aloud. But there was still more to learn, and what Daniel would find next would challenge everything he thought he knew about family. Sometimes truth arrives not as a shout, but as a whisper tucked between the pages of a forgotten letter. Daniel had uncovered pieces of his mother's heart, buried in the garden and wrapped in years of silence. But as the storm rolled in that evening, so did a revelation, one that would change how he saw himself forever. The wind howled through the pine trees behind the house. Rain danced against the windows, steady and soft, like fingers drumming a lullaby. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, the journal beside him, and a small bundle of letters he'd nearly missed, tucked in a corner of the cedar chest, wrapped in a faded blue ribbon. One envelope stood out. "To be opened only if I'm gone." The handwriting was unmistakable. His mother's. His breath caught. His hand hesitated above the flap. "My dearest Daniel, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And though it hurts to imagine you sitting there without me, I hope you've come home. I hope something, maybe this journal, brought you back. There's something I never told you. I wasn't sure I ever would. But life has a way of bringing things into the light, even if we try to hide them in the shadows. You were born in winter. A miracle, they said. But what they didn't know was that your father and we had drifted by then. He wasn't cruel, just distant. The kind of man who loved quietly, but not deeply. We tried to make it work. For you. But then he left. And I raised you alone. That's the story, you know. But there's more, Daniel. The man who raised you. He wasn't your biological father." Daniel froze. His eyes went back to the line. "The man who raised you. He wasn't your biological father." His heart beat loudly in his chest. He kept reading. "It was one night. One moment in time I never planned. A kindness during a storm. I never meant for it to happen, but it did. And you came from it. I never told anyone. Not even him. You were ours and you were loved. That's what mattered. But I couldn't leave this world without telling you the truth. Because I believe you deserve to know where you come from. Even if I kept it hidden for too long." His name was Samuel Whitaker. He lived in Blue Ridge, Georgia. He had a gentle soul and the kindest eyes I've ever seen. Whether you seek him or not, that's your choice. But I needed you to know the whole truth. Because love is built not just on what we say, but what we're brave enough to reveal. With all the love in my home." Daniel sat back in the chair, the letter trembling in his hand. For a long time he didn't move. He looked at the photos on the mantel. Himself as a child, his mother holding him close, the man he had always called Dad standing beside them, formal and stoic. So many years of memories. So many questions. He wasn't angry. Not really. but confused, and moored. Who was he really? A call to Miss Evelyn. As the storm quieted outside, Daniel picked up the phone and called next door. Miss Evelyn answered after 2 rings. "You all right?" she asked immediately, hearing something in his voice. "I found something," he said. "A letter. About my father." There was a long pause on the line. Then she said quietly, "Come on over, Daniel." Her living room was dim but warm. A small fire burned in the hearth. She handed him tea again, mint this time. He told her everything. When he finished, she let out a slow breath. "I always wondered," she said. "You knew." "Not for certain," she said. "But there were things. Glances. Quiet moments. Your mother. She carried her secrets like prayer, close and careful." He stared into his cup. "Do you think he knows about me?" She looked at him gently. If he was the kind of man she remembered in that journal, maybe. Or maybe he's wondered for 30 years. Daniel leaned back in the chair. "I don't even know what I'd say to him." Evelyn placed a hand over his. "You don't have to say anything yet," she said. "Some answers take time. Sometimes the truth arrives too late for explanation, but just in time for healing." For Daniel, his mother's honesty wasn't betrayal. It was a final act of love, raw, imperfect, and brave. We are not only made from blood and names, but from choices, silences, and quiet acts of grace. Daniel came seeking his mother. And now he had to decide whether to seek a man he never knew, or let the past rest in peace. Sometimes the journey toward truth isn't about the destination, it's about the courage to begin. Daniel had uncovered the deepest secret of his mother's life. And now he found himself staring at a map, with Blue Ridge circled in red. A place he'd never been, but suddenly felt drawn to, like a half-remembered dream. Change of clothes, the journal, a letter, and the photograph of his mother and a young man, the man she called Samuel. He filled the thermos with coffee and got in his car before the sun rose. Miss Evelyn stood on her porch, waving gently as he pulled away. "You go slow," she called. "I will," he replied. "I promise." The road stretched on, winding through the hills of Tennessee and into the heart of Georgia. Daniel let the miles pass without rush. With every bend he thought of her, his mother. How she must have stood at a similar crossroad years ago. Alone, young, carrying a life inside her and a heart full of questions. He stopped once at a roadside diner, ordered scrambled eggs and grits, and listened to an older couple argue over the crossword puzzle. Something about their voices, familiar, warm, reminded him of his parents when he was small. Before the distance, before the silence. He smiled to himself. Sometimes love is just quiet presence. Shared breakfast. Crossword clue. By late afternoon, Daniel rolled into Blue Ridge, a town folded into the mountains, with brick storefronts, flower boxes, and a clock tower that hadn't changed since 1950. He asked around delicately, mentioned the name Samuel Whitaker at a local hardware store. The man behind the counter squinted. "Sam. Yeah, sure. Lives out near Maple Hollow. Retired carpenter. Kind fella. Bit of a loner." "Why?" Daniel hesitated. "Just following a family thread." The man smiled. "Aren't we all?" He gave directions with a sketch on a napkin. It was a modest cabin, weathered but well-kept, nestled among tall trees. A white rocking chair sat on the porch. Wind chimes danced in the breeze. Daniel sat in the car for a while before getting out. His hands were sweating. Then the door opened. An older man stepped onto the porch, tall, silver-haired, wearing a plaid shirt and suspenders. His eyes, pale blue and searching, landed on Daniel. "You lost, son?" the man asked, voice gravelly but kind. Daniel stepped forward slowly. "No, sir. I think I might have just found something." The man raised an eyebrow. "Oh, my name is Daniel Morgan," he said. "I believe you knew my mother." "Margaret." The man didn't move. "Margaret Morgan," Daniel continued. "She lived in Tennessee." You might have known her 30-some years ago." The man lowered himself into the rocking chair slowly. "Maggie." Daniel nodded. The man was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I haven't heard that name in decades." Daniel sat on the porch steps. The silence between them felt sacred. Then Samuel spoke. "She had dark hair. Laugh like church bells. She came to town for a wedding. Her cousin, I think. We met in the rain." Daniel smiled softly. "She said it was a storm." Samuel nodded. "I never forgot her." They sat for over an hour, talking in soft tones. Samuel spoke of that brief time. A dance in the barn, a walk in the woods, a night where loneliness turned into something tender. "She never told me she was pregnant," Samuel said at last. "She never told anyone," Daniel replied. "She raised me herself." Samuel's eyes glistened. "I don't know what I expected," Daniel said. "I don't know why I came." "I'm glad you did," the man said. "You look like her, you know." Daniel chuckled. "Everyone says I look like my father." "Maybe you do," Samuel replied gently. "Maybe you have pieces of both." Daniel looked up. "Do you think? Would you want to know me?" Samuel looked away for a moment, then back. "I've lived a lot of quiet years, son. But if there's still time left, I'd be proud to share it with you." Daniel's throat tightened. "So would I." In the quiet corners of life, we often find the most profound truths. A man on a porch. A name remembered. A son returned. Daniel came in search of answers and found something deeper. A connection born not of years but of spirit. Sometimes it's not about how long we've known someone. It's about how deeply they fit into the missing pieces of our heart. And as the sun dipped behind the mountains that evening, Daniel understood something his mother always knew. That love, even when delayed, is never wasted. Sometimes the most powerful healing doesn't come in words. It comes in shared silence, in the comfort of being seen. For Daniel, the road to Blue Ridge brought not only answers but something he never expected to find. A place where his roots had quietly waited all along. The mornings in Blue Ridge were slow and soft. Samuel rose early, making 2 cups of coffee. Black for him, a splash of cream for Daniel. They sat on the porch in the stillness, watching the fog curl over the hills like a memory returning home. They didn't talk much that first morning. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. "I used to come out here and think," Samuel finally said, tapping the railing, "about the things I'd done right. And the things I let slip away." Daniel nodded. "Me too." Later that day, they walked through Samuel's workshop, a space that smelled of cedar, dust, and time. Stacks of wood leaned in corners. Hand tools hung with care. A half-finished bench sat in the center, smoothed and ready. "You work with your hands?" Samuel asked. "Not really," Daniel said. "I used to help my mom patch fences and fix up chairs. She was good at that sort of thing." Samuel smiled. "She always was more capable than she let on." He handed Daniel a chisel. "Let's finish this bench. Might be good for both of us." And so they did. The hours passed quietly, marked only by the scrape of wood, the scent of sawdust, and the rhythm of 2 men, one teaching, the other remembering. The next day, Samuel took Daniel into town. "Let's show you off," he said with a grin. "Folks need a new story." At the diner, a woman named June eyed Daniel curiously. "You're Sam's boy." Daniel blinked. I guess you could say that." She smiled. "You've got his quiet eyes." At the post office, another man clapped Samuel's shoulder. "Didn't know you had family." "Neither did I," Samuel replied with a warmth that made Daniel's chest tighten. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt since he was a boy eating grilled cheese in his mother's kitchen. He felt like he belonged. That evening, Samuel brought out a box. "I've kept things," he said. "From that time. Thought maybe you'd want to see." Inside were old photos. His mother in a sundress beside a younger Samuel. Concert ticket. Pressed flower. Daniel thumbed through them carefully. Then he found a letter, never sent. The envelope was yellowed, the writing gentle. Maggie, I think of you more than I should. Maybe because you were the first person who saw me without needing to fix me. I don't know what comes next for you. But if there's ever a time when you need someone, or if there's ever a child that looks like your eyes, know that I would be proud to know them. With a heart that never quite closed. Daniel swallowed the lump in his throat. She must have read this, he whispered. Samuel shook his head. I never sent it. Daniel looked up. She didn't know, Samuel said. But I always hoped she did. That Sunday, Samuel brought Daniel to the small local church. Nothing grand. Just creaky pews, stained glass, and the sound of old hymns. They sat in the back. A few turned to look. Daniel felt strangely comforted. When the pastor gave the benediction, he paused. We welcome a new guest today. Samuel's son. Whispers rippled. Samuel stood. My boy's come home, he said simply. Daniel blinked, taken aback by the tenderness in that phrase. He'd never heard it spoken like that before. And the church, this small old place, responded the way his heart had longed for. They clapped. In the quiet town of Blue Ridge, Daniel found more than answers. He found echoes of his mother's laughter in the people who remembered her, traces of her strength in the man who still loved her, and roots, long hidden, finally breaking through the soil. It's never too late to belong. Never too late to reach out a hand, build a bench, share a meal, or sit in a pew and be welcomed. Daniel had once ignored his mother's letters. But through her journal and the life she left behind, she taught him how to listen again. And now only one question remained. Would he return to the life he left behind? Or build something new here among the hills? Endings, like autumn, don't always come with a final breath. Sometimes they arrive slowly, in small acts of mending, forgiving, and choosing to stay. Daniel had come to Blue Ridge seeking a truth about his mother. What he found was the beginning of something much greater. Samuel's cabin was changing. Not drastically, just enough. A fresh coat of paint, a new bench out front, and now a shed in the making. Daniel hammered another nail into the frame. He wasn't much of a carpenter, but Samuel was patient. You ever think about staying? Samuel asked, not looking up. Daniel didn't answer right away. I have, he said finally. But I've also got a life back there. Job. Friends. Any of 'em waiting at your door when you get home? Daniel smiled faintly. No. Samuel chuckled. But I did leave some things undone, Daniel said. People I need to make things right with. That night, Daniel sat by the fire with a pen and paper. For the first time in years, he wrote to his mother, not as a son with regrets, but as a man who'd begun to understand her. Found him. His name is Samuel, and he remembers you with such gentleness it almost broke me. He never stopped wondering about you or me. I see now how much you carried. How you protected me, even when I didn't understand. And I'm sorry, not just for the years I was absent, but for the times I forgot you were human too. You did more than enough. And if I can become half the parent you were, I'll be proud. Thank you for leaving the journal. For trusting I'd read it one day. I hope you're at peace now. And I hope you know. Came home. Love always. Daniel. He folded the letter and placed it in the journal. 2 weeks later, Daniel returned to Tennessee with Samuel by his side. They visited the small hilltop cemetery where Margaret was buried. Wildflowers dotted the edge of the stone. Daniel knelt down and brushed away a leaf. He placed the journal at the base of the stone. I found it, he whispered. Everything you wanted me to know. Samuel stepped forward and touched the top of the stone. Thank you, he said softly. They stood in silence for a long time. Then Samuel pulled something from his coat pocket, the pressed flower he'd once saved, the one from his letter. He tucked it into the grass. Maggie always loved wild things, he said. Daniel nodded. So do I. Daniel spent the next few days tying up life back in the city. He called his old friend, Marcus, and apologized for disappearing. He spoke to his employer and arranged for part-time remote work. He even visited the house he grew up in, now empty but full of echoes. In the kitchen drawer, he found a photo of his mother laughing, flower on her face. He took it with him. "I'm not leaving you behind," he said aloud. "I'm bringing you with me." A new life, a familiar peace. Back in Blue Ridge, Daniel settled in. He moved into the guest room in Samuel's cabin while they planned a small cottage next door. He started helping folks in town, fixing fences, repainting porches, planting gardens. At church, he was no longer the new fella. He was Daniel, Tim's boy, Margaret's son. Every Sunday, he brought fresh flowers to the altar. Every evening, he and Samuel watched the sun go down behind the hills, not saying much. But everything had changed. The final reflection. One night, Daniel stood on the porch alone. The wind was gentle, the stars bright. Crickets sang in the grass. He thought of his mother, not just as the woman who raised him, but as the young girl she once was. Full of hope, burden, and love. He smiled. "Thank you," he whispered. He ignored his mother for years. Not out of cruelty but confusion, distance. The kind we all fall into when life pulls us away from the ones who love us most. But her journal, her words, they reached across time, through silence, and brought her son home. Daniel learned that family isn't always defined by what we expect. It's shaped by courage, forgiveness, and the quiet choice to try again. And in a small town wrapped in trees and memory, a mother's love kept blooming, even long after her hands were gone. Because love like that doesn't die. Wait, teaches. And when we're ready, it welcomes us home. In loving memory of every mother who quietly gave us everything.